I will. Thank you, Patty. Thanks for inviting me up here. It's really nice to be in Guilford. I live in Concord and spend a lot of time traveling around the state, sometimes talking about this, sometimes doing other public health work. I'm a public health guy. I spent time undergraduate studying sciences. In the last 20 years, I've really been working on environmental issues in New Hampshire through the State Department of Health. I left there 2 years ago. Now I'm working as a consultant myself and trying to help a couple of groups in the state, including Tick-Free New Hampshire, which I'm representing tonight, get the word out and try to reduce risk of ticks. Now we're here to talk about ticks, but what we're talking about a lot is misinformation and too much information. I think any of you could have stayed home tonight and gone on the web and tried to discover for yourself what's new, what's happening, what do I need to know about ticks and mosquitoes. But there's so much out there, and it's really hard to determine what is the best information. So I'm going to try and draw you in tonight and walk through about 30 or 40 minutes of talking, but more so engaging and having conversation on what you see happening in your community. I grew up in Western Massachusetts. My grandmother's from the Upper Valley of New Hampshire. I never had a tick on me all the way for the first 3 decades of my life. And only when I got to New Hampshire and started working here did people say to me, and it wasn't all New Hampshire, that was back in 1989, 1990, they said, watch out when you go to Durham, when you go to the seacoast, because of course I was connecting with UNH and doing things out there it's really bad, there's lots of ticks. Right? So that was the first place I had to be cautious for it. Now, 25, 30 years later, they're in almost every place south of the White Mountains and many places north. But ticks are very sensitive to temperature. They're very sensitive to moisture. That's why they really drop off when you have droughts and you have high season like July and August. Doesn't mean you can't get one. They just tend to be less. We'll talk more about their life cycle as we go through this. And we're going to cover kind of 3 different things. Oh, that's the volume. It's the side button, right? Patty, which one was I supposed to hit?
Got a tick in there.
Something's in there. Is that button there? That's the advanced button, right?
Somebody's telling me.
Okay, sorry.
All right.
Where's Hayden?
I did that one and it did the volume again.
Okay.
We'll do a manual on the computer.
Yeah, and I can do that for you.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to talk about really 3 things. We're going to talk about the tick biology and illness. If you understand the bug, you can understand the disease to some degree. We're going to talk about protection and repellents. Those are the most important things for protecting yourself and avoiding it for the most part. And tick habitat. If you can know where it's higher and lower risk, you'll be able to determine what your level of concern is. Then we'll do some Q&A. But we're going to do Q&A during the whole process. If you got a question, put your hand up. If I'm not covering something just right, let me know. And then we'll wrap up and talk about what you can do. So next slide. If all the power went out again or this stopped working, there's 3 things that you need to know. Tick numbers are growing, right? Ticks and tick bites are increasing because there's more ticks in more places with a longer season. I think our season has grown, frost-free season in New Hampshire has grown by about 27, 30 days over the last 30, 40 years. That's a big change. If you're a gardener, you know what I'm talking about. Mostly due to suburbanization, to some degree climate change, and also to changes in our wildlife. And we'll talk a little bit about that. The number of diseases has risen. So the short-term infections you're used to hearing about where you get bit by a tick and you get doxycycline or something else that kills off the short-term infection, those are important. There's 1,000 to 1,500 of Jeff's Lyme disease every year in the state. But unfortunately, anywhere from 15 to 20% of those people end up going on having some kind of long-term sequela. Some people call it chronic Lyme disease, but it's really not Lyme, right? You don't have the bacteria and the infection reproduce in your body, but it's opened up some pathway where now you've got maybe some neurological, maybe some brain fog, maybe you're not feeling as energetic as you used to. There's a lot of different things. So that's a lot of people who carry it on, and that's a good reason to reduce it. Bug stress and worry is another health impact. I'm concerned all the time. I like to mountain bike, I like to run, I like to garden, I sometimes go hunting. All those things bring on a little bit of stress for me. So I wanted to figure out for myself, what are the things I can do to reduce my stress level and enjoy the outdoors more in New Hampshire? And there are ways to reduce risk. You can avoid the habitat. We're going to talk about repellents, about how to correctly remove a tick, and also identify symptoms. So kind of walking along to where you're not getting exposed or bitten, to where you're bit, and then you get some symptoms. What can you do along the way to try to reduce your odds of a problem? And there's a lot of ways to increase your risk for bites too, and we'll talk about the things that people do. But there's one thing I left off of here, which is coming soon, maybe, there's probably going to be a new immunization for Lyme, at least. And we had one in the state 20 years ago, 25 years ago, but it was taken off for a couple different reasons. It wasn't risky or a problem. There weren't a lot of side effects, but there were marketing problems and other things, and I've got 1 or 2 friends who actually got it back then, and they're still protected. So they're doing a test right now, running across the Northeast, trying to figure out, can they get the right exact dosage and approach to make it most effective. The only problem with that is what? There's multiple pathogens out there, right? Babesiosis, anaplasmosis, Powassan virus, and we'll talk a little bit about those. But if you're protected for Lyme and not from the other things, are you going to start feeling more safe? Hey, you've got the big one hit. That's a good thing, but you're not perfectly protected. Next one. Okay, when did you start to notice more ticks in this geographic area? If you're a Lakes region or you came from somewhere else like me, were you seeing the same changes in the 80s, 90s? Later, up here? Yes. Yeah, it's definitely moving north.
I seem to get them from anywhere.
Yeah.
Every year, they all trying to get away from my hands. So I
Yeah.
get rid of them.
This gentleman had a tick on himself today. But you know, the problem with right now in April and May is it's the nymph season, right? The smallest of the ticks. So they're very hard to find. And we're going to talk about ways you can address that. Okay, next slide. We're going to talk about biology and the illnesses that they might cause. Talk about, next slide. So how do ticks live and die? We talked a little bit about temperature and moisture. You can keep clicking through here. First, their mating season and their range is really influenced by climate. That's why as we're slowly warming, they're kind of moving up through the state. Land use and wildlife. Those are the big things. And climate can be anything. It's not just the changing climate, but I mentioned that it first started on the seacoast because they probably moved up through Lyme, Connecticut, all the way up to here, and they move in those warm, wet areas first, right? The seacoast, the lakes region, up the river valleys, right? They're going to come first, and animals travel those pathways too. Land use, we'll talk more about. Fragmentation of our habitat. Second, they're sensitive to temperature and moisture, so they die off. We already talked about during droughts. That's a good thing, but droughts in general we don't want. But as we get more, drier and warmer in the summer, your risk will go down a little bit. Next. So third, they're part of a disease triangle. So you have to have a tick, and the tick species. You have to have the infection agent that can get into it, and you have to have the right environmental conditions. Those all come together. We've all been through COVID, right? So they were trying to teach us back then in the public area that you had to have the particular pathogen, right, the infectious agent. You had to have the humans that could pass it along, and we all learned that there were environmental conditions. So that's that same triangle of trying to manage each of those to try to reduce your risk and understand it. And lastly, they suck, right? They suck blood, and they can pass on germs to illness in humans, and that's why we want to really control them. All right, next slide. Land change. This is a picture of New England, and you can see on the left-hand side, there's left red area, and the right-hand side, there's a lot more. That's a change over, I think it's 20 years showing suburbanization. And when suburbanization happens, for those of you who build houses and deal with construction, you've got to clear a plot of land. When you do, you create edge habitat. Deer love that edge habitat. Mice love that habitat as well as chipmunks, so do a lot of birds. And they tend to be the species that when they get infected, they reproduce really well, and the ticks can take it off them and transfer it over. There are certain species which are dead end, where they get bitten by a tick which is infected and they don't start reproducing it. So that's why those three are so important. And when you see a deer and you see a mouse on your property, it's a good reminder that this is a higher risk time or a higher risk area. And they're everywhere. So there's one factor. I mentioned that, we used to have somewhere around, 110 days that were frost-free in New Hampshire. Now we're up above 140. Those are all times where ticks can quest for blood, right? They can be looking for you. They don't like cold weather, so pretty much when it's freezing, they're not going to be moving. And anything under 40 degrees, they're not very active. But we all know you get out on a nice fall day where it starts off being 40 or so, and all of a sudden you're sitting in the sun, you're laying in some leaves or some grass, and it's feeling like 50, 60 degrees, and ticks will begin to quest again and try to bite you. And the last one is the next slide. Looking at kind of the role of wildlife, and I'll try and see if I can use my pointer here. It does work. So we talked about deer and the small animals. Numbers have increased. There's less predators in the state on average, and there's more edge habitat due to suburbanization, so we're going to have more numbers. And the tick eggs start off here. Once they're laid, they go to the larval stage, which can only bite small animals. They go through a 4-season. They become a nymph, which is what's out there right now in April and May and June in New Hampshire. Once they hit this stage, they can begin biting bigger animals, reproduce again, molt into adults, and that's where they can bite also large animals, and they begin laying again in the whole unhappy tick cycle, or happy for them. The tick cycle goes on. And as I said, they're primarily harbored in mice, deer, and robins. That's in the Northeast. That's what really keeps carrying this pathogen around. Yes, sir?
What's the difference between a deer tick? Is that bigger than a regular tick?
Well, there's 4 types of ticks I'm going to get to. I think I have them in here. And we'll talk about it. But the deer tick is the one that is most common, and it carries the most number of different germs in it. So that's one we are concerned about the most. There's a new one coming that we'll talk about. Next slide, which is a Lone Star tick. And we'll talk about what that can carry too. So here we talked about how over time we've seen ticks and tick population moving up. And you can see there's still a line more or less here at the Lakes region and White Mountains really going through here, which cuts back a lot of these. Because it freezes much more up in these areas, it's hard for ticks to really get a foothold in there and get a reproducing population. They can, but it's more rare. And you can see that these dark areas are more than 200. So the average is probably around 100 in southern New Hampshire in general. About 1% of the population per year, I think, gets Lyme disease. But these are the high risk. So let's go to next slide, and we'll look at the Lakes region. All right, here we are in Guilford. And you can see you've got a couple of towns around here which are much higher incidence of Lyme disease. Why is that? Is there more outdoor recreation? Are there more kids that are young? 5 to 15-year-olds tend to be the most at risk for them. What do people think could be happening in here that might be causing it?
More lowlands.
Yeah? Okay, so less freezing? Yeah?
More wildland, more less developed.
Yeah.
Would you repeat some of what's being said here?
Sure.
I didn't hear what was
So
said, yeah, but I didn't hear what you were saying, yeah, too.
one person was saying that these could be more lowlands. I mean, I imagine the lake goes right kind of through here, right? Maybe up and down there. I wish the lake was in here, but they didn't do it on this map. So we're just saying, we're asking ourselves, what could be the reasons that these dark areas are more risky than the lighter areas? Because these are where there are more cases of Lyme disease around here. It might be the population of people. It might be the type of habitat. Like we're hearing lowlands versus highlands, which freeze and knock down the tick populations more. So those are a couple of ideas of why you're different up here in this region. Next slide. So here we're looking at the black-legged tick that this gentleman was just talking about. And here you've got a nice picture of the nymph stage. I'm sorry, that's a nymph stage there. And the adult male, adult female, I believe is what they are. Relatively easy to see these.
You can see them anywhere.
Yeah. Okay, next slide. So risk factors, much higher in kids, especially 5 to 15-year-old males. Why? They probably spend more time outdoors. They're probably less concerned. They haven't been trained yet in how to protect themselves and use repellents, do those things. and they're probably not as good at taking showers or in trying to like get their clothes off at the end of the day. That's just the nature of young boys. They take more chances in many ways. That's okay. Higher illness also in outdoor workers, gardeners, foresters, landscapers, and people that do outdoor recreation in general. We know that's true. And higher risk in families with 2 or more outdoor pets. That's not a huge race, but it kind of reminds you, even if you stay inside, right, completely protected from it, they'll come inside on your pets. They'll crawl in the same place, and we'll talk later about some ways we might be able to break that cycle. Next slide. So we've really got 3 infections we're concerned about here: Lyme disease, tick flu, I'll call it, and Texas fever. I tried to take out the Latin terms. You know, a lot of the epidemiologists I work with teach that way, but I think what's important is to say something you remember and that relates to the condition. We know what Lyme disease is. We know some of the symptoms there. Tick flu gives that general malaise. Oh, it's jumping ahead. All right. So the Lyme disease, you get this. It's a lot of it's flu-like symptoms. You get malaise. You can have headaches. You can have a slight fever, and in a little later stage, you start to have. There we go. So common symptoms in all of these are flu-like feelings of fever, headache, and fatigue. That's not that helpful, other than if you know it's not flu season and you haven't been exposed and you're having all those symptoms, it's a good time to think about, what have my exposures been? It's springtime. I could have gotten bitten without noticing it because the ticks are so small. And the top 3 are Lyme disease, something called anaplasmosis, which is really just tick flu, and then Texas fever, which is babiosis. There's also 2 others, Ontario encephalitis, which when you say encephalitis, most people remember it's a brain swelling, and that's the problem with the Powassan virus. And there's a relapsing fever. So if you're getting hot, getting cool, you're getting hot, you might know that could be related to this particular one. The other most important ones about Powassan virus is that it has, it can cause that alpha-gal syndrome, where you become allergic to meat, any mammalian meat, right? Anything that feeds its young through teats, for lack of a better term. You can still eat birds and other things, but it'll cause an allergy where you're no longer able to digest that. Yeah, very rare now, but it happens. Yes?
Are there adult ticks now out?
That's a great question. I think if they've been lucky enough to overwinter in a warm area, it's possible.
Because I took a tick off 3 paws of my dog last evening after the walk.
Yep.
And we just walked on the street, and she was just in the side,
Right?
just in that.
Did they look like adults? Did they look like that larger one?
They were large.
Yeah.
But I got rid of them. I didn't examine them.
Right. That's what most people want to do. Get rid of them as soon as possible. But I'm going to give you a kit where you can collect it and hold it today, because I want you to be able to hold on to them if needed. Next slide. So, you know, the bullseye rash is people talk about a lot as an indicator, and it is, right? In about 80% of the cases, you'll get something that looks like this. The problem is, this is about the only one that really looks like a bullseye. That one does a little bit, but still no center. That one looks like a real bullseye, but all these other variations are out there. So if you've got a rash and you're having flu-like symptoms, it's a good time to go and get checked out. Later feelings may include muscle and joint aches too. Just to know it's not clear, go see your doctor, at least call the nurse line. Yes?
I had a tick bite a couple years ago, and the only symptom I had for a week was I had a very itchy spot.
Yep.
And after a week, then the round circular bullseye came out. But up until that point, I had no idea it was
Oh.
a tick bite.
Oh, so you didn't find it, you didn't find it and take it off. Okay. Yep, I just want you to know there's a lot of variation. It's not an easy one to diagnose always, but we're in New Hampshire. If you're outdoors, you need to be thinking about it as part of it. Next slide. All right, so tick versus mosquitoes. I'm not going to talk a lot about mosquitoes because it's a relatively low risk in the state. We do get triple E and West Nile virus, things of that sort, but it's usually late summer, and it tends to happen more in the southern part of the state, although I know you've had some cases here. Ticks bite less often, yet there's a higher disease rate, right? So you might only get 1 bite every other year or so, depending on your risk. But if you do, the risk is really high. Mosquitoes bite more often. I think we all get bit by mosquitoes every single year. I know I do, but the risk of illness is very low. And it can be much more severe, though. It does lead to encephalitis and swelling of the brain. So that's very concerning, and the mortality or death rate is much higher for those. Different habitats and timing. Ticks, I mentioned, were active when it's frost-free or over 40 degrees. They can quest and go. Mosquitoes acting mostly at dusk and dawn, and it's not year-round. It's only when they're reproducing, usually in the mid to late summer and into the fall. So I just want to know they're different. The good news here is that there are 3 different repellents that are available now, which are all effective on both ticks and on mosquitoes. So that's why I really talk a lot about these, and we'll get into it a little bit later, because these are the ones you should have. Not just because they're effective, but because people are picky, right? And you want to have some at home for your grandkids, for your friends, or otherwise, where they can make a choice. And we'll talk about those choices. Next slide. What's your experience? You know anybody who's had a tick bite? We've heard about a couple already. Anybody who's had an illness that wants to share anything, because it's always helpful to learn. I appreciate that you did.
Someone in the back.
Yes,
I have Lyme disease, I got it 25 years ago.
and you're still experiencing?
I still have issues with it.
Uh-huh.
Recurrent things that go wrong in my system.
Yep.
But I never had a mark. There was nothing other than the flu symptoms, malaise, achy muscles and stuff. And it took probably 6 years before anybody figured it out.
Did they do a positive test, blood test?
I did. I
Yep.
had several of them early on that came back negative.
Yep.
I finally got to Dr. Horowitz in upstate New York and got diagnosed and started treatment.
It's not a great test. Many, many false negatives, very few false positives. So if it keeps coming back negative, they say keep testing if it looks like it's the right symptom pattern otherwise. So I'm glad you did and finally figured it out. Not that there's a resolution, but you're one of those unfortunate people that ended up in that 5 to 20% range of you've got things that are going on. So, all right, next slide. Oh, another one.
Someone else in the back?
One of my sisters got the Lyme disease, and she was undiagnosed for months.
Right.
She ended up getting Bell's palsy and having to go on an IV drip.
Wow, with antibiotics.
Pardon me?
Antibiotic IV drip? Yeah.
And we had a good friend who at age 42, which is like 35 years ago, got it, and she got very sick because it went undiagnosed for a long time, and she had her organs shut down, and she's died. She's been in a wheelchair since age 42,
Yeah.
and she died in her 70s.
Yeah, we don't have good statistics on the people who have died from the sequela, the outcome of Lyme disease. We've had 1 or 2 deaths from Lyme carditis, they call it, where it infects the heart. But there's so many other people who get discouraged because of their long-term symptoms and such. We don't track that. It's very hard, right? How do you find those people unless they come to you? We have a registry in the state where every Lyme disease we record, whether it's actually diagnosed with a test or whether it's suspected. And that means that if you get into the office and you said, I had a tick bite, they will treat you prophylactically, right, with the antibiotic. And you may never come back with a positive test, but you still go in there as that. I think I've got a picture of it here, of that suspected or likely. Next slide. And next one again. So let's talk about the repellents, which is your most important protection. Next slide. All right, you can use clothing. If you're not a big fan of repellents, you don't want to use them if you're going into heavy tick habitat, obviously having pants that are tucked into your socks, a shirt that's long sleeved, anything that can kind of keep them off of it, and relatively light colored so you can see the ticks crawling across you. That's generally what people want to do. Problem is that somewhere around end of May or June, nobody wants to wear long pants and long shirts. I don't want to in New Hampshire. So we end up going back to trying to find something that works on shorts and short shirts. So we've learned that if you treat with permethrin, right, something like this that you can buy, you can get a lot of protection. They would, down in Rhode Island, they do a lot of great tick work, and they would brought a bunch of people into a lab, and they put live ticks, uninfected ticks, onto their shoes, which are treated by permethrin. They found that they can knock down 74% times protection. That means, the ticks were latching on the shoes and trying to crawl up the leg, but they would get stopped here. And most of the ticks that did go up and attach were actually dead by the time that happened. Spraying the pants also works. You get 5 times the protection, and spraying your shirt gets 3 times the protection. And that should remind you most ticks are way down there, right? Unless you're rolling in the grass, most of the time they're not up here on high bushes and grass, things of that sort. They can be there, but they like being low where most of the animals are, right? Where they're going to get. You're just kind of added benefit for a large human to stop by and get bitten.
Do they drop out of trees?
No, there's no evidence that they drop out of trees. It's obviously that if there's a bird in a tree, or I just told you an American robin, and if it happened to completely fill itself, drop off at that point, it would land on you, but it'd probably be full of blood. It could lay eggs up there, but I think they like to go down low where it's protected from the sun and in the shade and lay them. So maybe, but not likely. And if they do, what can you do about it? Yes?
Is that chemical that you just held up, is that just for spraying on clothing, not for your skin?
Correct.
It wants to be sprayed.
Yep. And I'm going to go over those. Yes, sir.
So last fall, I was working outside and I went through some pine trees
Yeah.
and I felt something hit my neck
Yep.
and I had 2 ticks later. So
Right.
they'll fall out of the low hanging.
And was it low hanging enough that a deer could have gone by, or was it higher? Just curiosity.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I've gotten more going through trees than I have.
See?
Which is weird.
That's why I asked the question, because we'll always come up with a new story. Matt says they're mostly all down here. Someone else says, well, listen, that may be true, but I got one.
I felt them on my neck.
Yeah.
Do they
Yes.
jump?
No, there's no jumping. There is the newer one, the Lone Star tick can run and move towards you. That's a change. They smell your carbon dioxide and they move towards you. It's the first tick we have up here that does that. Yes.
So we have a porch, and my husband and his friend were sitting outside, and there's trees in front of us, arborvitae's, really tall ones, and they would blow off, and they both had ticks from the trees.
Okay.
They're high.
Yeah.
There's also a recent German study about the static electricity will attract a tick.
Really?
It actually will almost make it like jump from an object to a person or something.
You did your reading, didn't you, before you came?
It was
I like that. Okay, next slide. Okay, how to choose the right repellent. We need to know a little bit why people do and don't use them. I have all these repellents here. I carry them around. People know me as a tick guy, but I can't get people to use them. A lot of people are afraid of using repellents. And one of the reasons is it's somewhat the odor. People don't like the smell differently. It's the skin feel. Feels like it's a little bit of a solvent on you. But there's also chemophobia. A lot of people think that these chemicals are more dangerous than actually getting the disease, right? Or they're dangerous enough that they want to go with a natural product. The problem is the natural products aren't tested, so we don't know they're effective. They might be effective in one study over here or there, but the good news is that these have all been tested, and for 4 to 8 to 12 hours, they're effective against both ticks and mosquitoes. And that's why we really emphasize that people use them. And people have concerns about DEET because there's, been told for years that it's stronger than the rest of them out there, but it's effective. And it's the most effective one. It's affordable. The new one, Picardin, is great, and it feels a lot easier and lighter on your skin. And this one, oil of lemon eucalyptus, is relatively natural. I don't think they're squeezing little lemon eucalyptus to get it. They probably make it in a factory, but if someone's very chemophobic, this is an effective one. So products have the dual protection. They provide multiple choices, and they emphasize the safety records and effectiveness of all of them. And the uncertainty, you should talk to people and say, you can use the botanical ones just to know we don't know if they're effective or not, and that's important. I talked about too much information when I first started off talking tonight, but misinformation is also out there about the risks with these, and I'm trying to go out and talk to people to say how effective they are. And effective, not effective, but safe and effective, and they've been tested on pregnant women, young children, breastfeeding women, and they don't see it coming through the body and being through it. Even if it does, it's very low toxicity. What it does actually, it's called a repellent, not an insecticide, because what happens when the insect gets near it is their chemical receptors get confused. It doesn't kill them. They're like moving. They're like, I got to bite, I got to land, I got to bite, I got to sting, and then they get confused. They're like, was I going to land? Was I going to bite? What was I going to do? It doesn't know what to do. It's like we've all had those moments, you know, when we're drinking or doing something else where we get confused too, and that's what it does to the bugs. This kills them. When they walk across the fabric, at least about 10 inches of it, that will drop them off dead. But it's also low toxicity. It's more of an irritant than it is a toxin. Yes?
Are you gonna put up a slide with the names of those things?
Yes, I am.
Do you have a handout?
I do. You can start passing these around right now.
You need to make more copies, man.
I think we're okay. I've got 20 here. Have you made a count yet?
There's 34 here.
Wow. Okay, let me take one of those. If you pass one of these here, I'll have Patty go out and make one.
Change the slides.
All right. Okay, here we go. Someone asked for the three, and now we're going to cover them in a little more detail. DEET is petroleum-based, right? It's made from wonderful oil sources somewhere. They first discovered it because people were stripping, degreasing things in a factory in the south, and they noticed mosquitoes never came by those people that were doing the degreasing. They found out that it was DEET within it. That's how we got the cheapest, most effective product that we've seen in a long time. It's effective, it's long-lasting, it's affordable, and it's safe for all humans, including people that are pregnant and breastfeeding. Obviously, you can over-apply it. If you try hard, you can put on too much DEET, and people do it, and you see them pop up in the statistics in the poison centers every year. But it's usually because they cover their head and toe for a day or two on a trip with a high concentration. And is it irritation? Is it something more? I don't know, but people, especially who have, a susceptibility to seizures can have some problems. So there's certain individuals who should be more concerned.
So different percentages of DEET in the,
These all come in different formulations, yeah.
but even off has like family,
They do.
you know, kind that has like 6% DEET versus.
They found there's a sweet range of like 20 to 30%. It is really effective at that percentage. It lasts 4 to 6 hours, right? And they've used that on a lot of studies they've done and found it to be effective. You can go up to 100%, a really small thing of, you know, Ben's Deep Woods, and take that with you. If you don't want to carry a lot of weight with you, you just want to know, you'll probably, you know, spread it a little bit more thinly. But it's hard to kind of talk about formulation because they're all so different and they're all changing. And they start combining two together and things like that, so it gets challenging. The cons of DEET is that it is a solvent. If you spray it on your plastic gear, on your boat, on your climbing gear, on your other things, it can dissolve it slightly, or a lot. So that's why people were looking for new ways to come up with. They found Picardin, which is a black pepper product. And that's a lighter smell, non-solvent, still safe for all people, but a lot more expensive, maybe twice as much. And then finally, oil of lemon eucalyptus, wonderful. It's a botanical product. It's natural, also safe for all people. Problem with it, it's very short lasting. And if you want to smell like a really strong flower for a whole day, and you want your clothes to smell like it for a whole week, this is your product. And I'll use it once in a while, but you know, all the concerned moms and dads want to use this one because it's made from a flower originally. And that's why you give people a choice, right? Hey, you pick one. Go ahead.
Are you prepared to talk about pets?
Yes.
Because I used to spray the eucalyptus on, and when my dog saw it, she'd recoil.
She sure would. They've got a nose much better than ours.
I was thinking about getting that
Oh, thank you.
just to spray on her paws. She has a Seresto collar, and I've only found it, like I said, on her paws.
All right.
I got it.
You got it? Okay, now we're going to talk about clothing. We're going to talk about, actually, if you go, I think you went back one. I might have jumped. We're going to talk about permethrin or pyrethroids, and these are originally extracted from chrysanthemum or mums, right? The ones we all put out in the fall. It's really effective, long-lasting, affordable, very safe for humans, and low toxicity. It's more of an irritant on the skin than a toxin. And that's why there's some concerns with spraying it on your own skin. Cons, you want to avoid spraying it directly on your skin, as it may cause irritation. But we put it directly on our dogs and cats, right? Do they live shorter than we do? Yes, but we put it on it because they have long fur coats, so that's their clothing. And it really only attaches well to clothing. You could spray it on your skin, but it really wouldn't stay, right? You need something with a big coat of fur, or you need something like this, which are the pre-impregnated or treated clothing. This is a nice one because it's all mesh, right? Very lightweight. You could wear this probably almost all summer without sweating. Here's one of those long shirts that's pre-treated. This will last for 6 years or 60 washes. Is it a little less effective than what you spray yourself? Yes. So again, you've got a choice. You could take this and treat your own clothing, and it'll last for 6 weeks or 6 washes. Pretty cheap, though. You're not paying, you know, $60 or $70 for a product. You're doing it all yourself with what you have already. Yes, sir.
You said you would recommend, or at least people do put permethrin on their dogs.
Yes.
Your cat. What happens if they're licking the fur?
It's more of an irritant. It's relatively low toxicity. It's really because it's a skin irritant that you don't want to put on it. It's different than what you put on the back of their neck, which is a front line, right? That's a much more powerful one that gets into the whole system. This, in a tick shampoo you would put on your dog or maybe cat if you could get them to do that, that would last for, again, probably 6 weeks or 6 washings or 6 times getting wet. But it's relatively low toxicity.
Say again what that was, is it tick shampoo?
Yeah, you can buy tick shampoo in any pet store or other store. Wash and then for the next 6 weeks, they're relatively protected. Most people go with the collar, right, because it's easier and cheaper. Yes?
The spray, the permethrin,
Yep.
would you have to spray it saturated or just spray? Like you spray like the off?
No, you have to saturate it. You have to go up and down. I didn't have time to talk about it today, and I know we're at about a little after 6 now. But you want to saturate it. You want to hang it up on something like this. Exactly. I did this with the Landscape Association earlier. You saturate, especially the lower areas, but saturate the whole area from about 8 inches away. Let it dry for 2 or 3 hours, and then you're set to go for 6 weeks. Can't really hang this any higher, can I?
And going through the washer with it and the dryer will not remove what you.
It will. You can only get 6 washes out of it.
But you
After
can
that,
wash
you have
it.
to treat again.
Okay, but
So what I do is I wash, I let it go for a week if I can, wash it, and then let it air dry. If I put it in the dryer, it's okay, but it'll bring down the effectiveness, right? So I'm trying to keep it up and on me, or whoever it is, as much as possible. Yes?
Where do you get those kind of clothes? I've never seen those.
You can buy them online. You can buy them at REI, LL Bean, any of the big sporting or hunting stores. Yep. They're out there. Okay, next slide. So here's the 3 ones, just an example. What I do is, as I say, I do a tick kit, a tick 6-pack. So I have in here for people to choose the DEET, the Picardin, and the oil of lemon eucalyptus. And then I bring a bottle of permethrin, right, in case I have a chance to spray something, and some sunblock. There's a perfect summer kit. And I have in there the repellent guidelines that I gave to everybody here, so I can remind people the right way to use them. And then I put in one of these tick kits, which I'm going to give you all when we get to the point of learning how to take ticks off and how to preserve them. So that's one thing you can put in your home, in your car, at your camp, and you know you've covered for the most effective prevention that you can have, short and long term. Okay, next slide. Now we're going to talk about tick checks. So think about it 2 ways. You can look for a tick or you can feel for a tick, right? There's a visual tick check, which is what most people recommend. I don't as much, only because when I look at the findings in the research studies, I find they're not as effective, and I know they're difficult to do. You need to be fairly old to do it, or you need someone to do it for you. There's one burden. You need bright light. You need to strip all your clothes down, right, and get them off to look and visualize it. You need good eyesight. You need to be able to get your foot up and look at things. It's a lot of things. You actually have to be physically mobile enough to look for things. Even when you've done that, you've missed your backside, over here, at the back of your head, a lot of things that you can't see, right? So they're not the best, and the research studies, you can go to the next slide, show that actually taking a bath within 2 hours, taking your clothes all off and leaving them off, taking a bath or shower within 2 hours of getting in reduces your risk for getting a tick bite and for getting Lyme disease. Those are two different kind of outcomes, down significantly, below a visual check. And it's because it's easy. You have to, if you put on a repellent, you probably want to take a bath anyway, right? Or a shower at the end of the day. You have to get all your clothes off to do a bath. Whereas a tick check, you could just go like, well, I'm going to take off most of my clothes. You know, I'll do a toilet check where I sit down and while I'm using the bathroom, I'll look through my legs. People do that. It's one of the recommended techniques, but you never get it all off. With a bath, you get it all off, and then you take soap, put it on your body, and you have this perfect kind of tactile feel. You can really feel all the small spaces, right? You can feel the bumps, because we all know where the bumps are, should be, or shouldn't be on our own body. Most of us do. And it's a much more effective way to get there. So I'm really changing the way I teach and telling people, if you miss everything during the day, just get your clothes off and get a good bath or shower at the end of the day. Your risk will go down. Or do it for your kids, right? Especially those 5 to 15-year-olds, because they're the ones that are going to be carrying more on them. They've been in there. So multiple benefits are all there. So think about baths as a good way to relax at the end of the day and deal with ticks and your risk. Next slide.
So, when you take your clothes off after walking, should you just like throw that in the laundry? Or wash it right away?
There's two things that people say. You can throw them in the laundry and do it. If you don't want to do that, you're like, I'm a Yankee, I don't want to like do all that work, put them in the dryer, if they're not too dirty, for 15 minutes on medium to high, and that dehydrates and kills most of the ticks. Yeah?
Do they show up in your lint trap then?
Yeah, they will. And remember, we're not just learning about ticks and repellents. We're talking about the biology. And when you learn that they're really sensitive to temperature and they're sensitive to moisture, you can start thinking about all the ways you can effectively get rid of them. And we'll talk more about that, but it is a lot about the biology. All right, now we get to pass out the tick kits. And again, I really thought there's only about 20 people. This is a great size. So if there's 2 people here together, I'll ask you just to take one and share it, and the rest can have one.
Ticks drown in the water?
I don't think they do. They're very tough. I've never heard of that being effective.
I've washed clothes and then put them in the dryer, and my washing machine had the ticks all in it.
Really?
Yes.
In there and crawling?
Yes,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
were. Yes, they were.
Can you say that again?
I was working in my garden one year, and we created a new garden. We had just moved up here. I'm a city girl, not many ticks there.
Right.
You know, worked all day, and put the clothes in, washed them, showered, and took the clothes out and put them in the dryer, and there were ticks all in my washing machine. And I had taken a shower, washed my hair, straightened my hair with a straightener, and later we went out and there was a tick crawling down my bangs.
This is what you need. You need a hair comb that's made for ticks. You can pass that around and so people can see it. People have young.
It looks like they're one of those knit combs.
Exactly. It's very close.
Hey, I had 4 kids, I know.
All right. Yes, sir.
I've used that top white one.
I have. They're fair.
That works good.
You like it?
Gets the head out.
Yeah.
That's the
We're really tiny ones. I haven't found it be effective. Yes.
Every year I take cotton balls and I spray them with permethrin.
Yes.
And I put them in toilet paper tubes.
Yep.
And put them around the edges of
Yes.
my yard and around walls and stuff. Is that a worthwhile thing to do?
I can't find a study that says that reduces Lyme disease in people. It will make the happiest mice in the neighborhood because they'll be tick free. but they haven't translated it into showing that people are healthier, safer, lower risk. So even though it sounds great and a lot of people do it, I can't say it's like high on the list, so I don't mention it here. Yes?
Is there anything you can put on it before you pull it off that makes them like?
Nope. Haven't found any solvent, because what they do is they insert and bite. They exclude a glue that holds them in there. I think they even have a mechanism there like a vampire bat where you can't feel the bite, an analgesic. And then they dissolve it when they're all done and they pop off, but I have not found anything good. And people recommend petroleum jelly, alcohol, a burnt match. None of those things seem to help. In fact, if anything, they think it might help the tick vomit more and express more germs inside of your system. So generally not recommended. Just cleanly try to get them off. Yes?
What's the best way to kill them?
You know, they're hard, but I take them and put them on something hard, you know, and just squeeze like this and try and tear them apart. That seems to be the only thing. Down the toilet, put them on tape and throw them out. You know, that I do too. Those are 3 techniques. Scotch tape.
I wrap
Yep.
mine in a little piece of tape, seal it all around it, and then.
Yep. And someone say burn them? Burn them? Back there. Did you say burn them to death? Yeah. That's cathartic. That would make me feel better. But I don't know if it's more effective. All right, so you all have a tick. Most of you have a tick kit now. It should have a tick ID card about how to do the extraction and maybe how to identify it. I find it relatively hard. There should be actually, you've got these small little levers that I gave you because they were really affordable. These are all $1 a piece, and I couldn't afford that for this one. I couldn't get them free for anybody. So I gave you that, but that's called the tick spoon. You see it's got a little V there. Works fairly good. Tweezers are great because they're always in a first aid kit anyway, so they're and you should have a clear vial. And, oh, do you have that vial? Can you pass that around to people? There's a live tick that this gentleman found.
Here he is. Pass it around.
If you want to see one crawling around. And there's a chance if you extract it and put it in there. There are labs now at UNH, UMass, otherwise over in Vermont too, that can test it and actually tell you if there's a pathogen in there. I don't know how they get such a small sample, and they can tell you, but that might help because if you go to your doctor and he's like, yep, it's got the Lyme pathogen, it's got borreliosis, it's got anaplasmosis, and maybe some others, that doctor would then know, I'm going to treat this person very different than if they just had one. So it might be worth the $20.
We have a lab in Ashland, it's called Bebop Lab.
Bebop Lab, Ashland, New Hampshire? Yes, you're right, by Plymouth.
I'm sent them in to see what the tick's carrying.
And what'd you find?
One of the ticks wasn't carrying anything.
Good. That's never the one that bites me, though, right?
Called in Plymouth, you said?
Bebop Labs. If you Google tick testing, New Hampshire, it'll pop up. All right, next slide. Let's see. Yep, we've gone through that. Tick removal. All right, we already covered some of this. People are like, what should I do? Should I put any kind of liquid or material on it? The best thing you can do is grab it by the side and pull it straight up and out. And if you're lucky, the whole head comes out. It's really not a head, but the mouth parts come out, and you've got just a small area there you can clean with a little alcohol or soap and water. Both will work well. Take that out, put it in your kit if you can, just as a memory, but if you want to get it tested, that's possible too. And you can see the guidelines for yourself there. Tweezers or some other device, pull it up steadily, even pressure, not yanking, and try not to break off as much. But I've had difficulty extracting ticks. I haven't found it to be particularly easy. People who have dogs and cats and do it all the time probably get very good at it. Next slide. Yes, sir.
More chance of a small tick versus a large tick of carrying pathogens?
I don't know. I don't think so. No. They have to feed once in the cycle on a small animal that has the pathogen, one of them. And then once they've got that, they can begin transferring it. So even the nymphs that can bite us are there. What conditions do ticks like and not like? We're talking about one more time, just a reminder of the biology. They like warm, more shaded areas. They want to be protected from dehydrating, and they want to be nearby small animals. So that means rock walls, wood piles, which is where we see all of our mice and chipmunks running around, and under there is where they do best. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see why that is important, because if you're going to try to change your backyard to make it what? Hotter and drier, right? You would put a line of bark mulch, right? A three foot wide line of bark mulch along here. And as they crawl from the edge habitat, where all the animals are, they try to crawl out here. They have a difficult time doing it, and they get dried out. If you've mowed your lawn in here, you're also not giving them much. They say you want another 3 yards beyond this 3 foot area, so that they have to migrate across mowed lawn in order to get to you, right? And here's you in the garden. Here's your kids on the swing set. Here's your deck in your house here. So you're trying to make it as hard as possible. Wouldn't it be nice if all yards were shaped just like that? But they're not. So you're going to have to go home using the skills you have now about drying those ticks out, right? And making sure they have less moisture, just trying to figure out what would work best in your yard or your kid's yard. Yes?
And so I think that also means you want to keep your grass short.
Exactly. You'd want to. And this is not high on the list. Like, these repellents are the most effective way you're going to prevent a tick bite here. This is a good idea if you want to go a step further, but it hasn't been shown to be super, super effective. And of course, we don't live just in our yards. We go to the park, we go to school, we go to all the other places. So this is just a nice thing if you want to do it.
What about the stuff they sell like at Lowe's and says, it's like something you put on your lawn, chicken and
Yes.
mosquito repellent?
Do we have any biologists here or evolutionary people who study that in school? What happens when you treat a whole area of ticks? Some ticks get a lot of pesticide and die. Some get a little bit of pesticide and live, and they build up resistance, right? So when I see those ticks going around the neighborhood mosquito squad, I'm like, thank you for creating a new round of ticks that are probably becoming resistant to some of our most effective ones. And I've talked to the Department of Agriculture.
What is that tick? Which tick is that?
That looks like a deer tick to me.
A deer tick?
Yeah.
But what, adult, female?
I didn't look at it that closely.
Do turkeys, we have a bunch of turkeys across
Yeah.
the yard, do they eat the ticks?
No, there's been talk about
Guinea hens.
Guinea hens eat a lot. Turkeys eat some. Supposedly opossums eat. They don't eat a lot. They just keep themselves very well manicured, right? They don't let they what do they call it? Groom each other, and they keep them down. There's no way any animal is going to clean up the number of ticks we have in our woods in New Hampshire, right? This is impossible. They're a lower risk species for their own sense, but there's not a big advantage there. Yeah, like if we had a lot of turkeys, it doesn't mean you have less ticks. Probably have more. Yes, sir.
What kind of a barrier is that? You said
It would be bark mulch
bark mulch.
or rubber mulch or anything that stays dries out quickly. But if it's covered by trees here, it's still going to be a bit shaded. It's not perfect. It's just a nice idea. We talk about it. We teach it. Next slide. Okay, now here we're going to. Some people were talking about pets before. Know the risk factors. We mentioned that if you've got 2 or more outdoor pets, that brings your risk up. If you've got effective treatments, you ask your vet, right? Are you going to do a tea and flick bath? Are you going to do collars or treatment of the fur? Can you get an immunization for your animal, not to protect you, to protect it from getting Lyme disease? And the other behaviors are to perform tick checks on your pets. Don't let them on the same furniture or beds if you can. And treat the bedding with permethrin. I didn't bring it here, but when I do treatment of clothing, I will lay out, say, like 4x4 piece of flannel an old flannel sheet or a regular sheet, spray it on, get that nicely saturated. Then I take that, and when people bring over dogs or a dog stays for the night, we have them stay there. So if it brought any ticks in, we're hoping it's going to lay in the the most protected place.
One question.
Yeah.
When you spray that on the dog, on the pet?
Nope, I would only spray this on clothing
Okay.
or gear, tenting.
What do you spray on the animal? You said you sprayed something on the animal.
I would do a tick shampoo, I think is the most effective one.
Not that.
Not that. I don't think it would hurt them. I just don't think it's as effective on it. You know, it's just like formulated to stick to clothing more than to stick to fur. Next slide. Okay. Having gone through tonight, what's coming through for you? What do you think are the most effective ways that you're going to change or do it?
I haven't tried it. I'm sorry. We have a friend
Yep,
who wears short pants all the time,
yep.
and he likes to, he feels it,
Oh, okay.
and he finds that much more effective than if he's got clothing on, because then, you know, you don't know what you're feeling.
Right.
It works very well for him, and he's a very outdoorsy person.
Yeah. He's got a technique. I hope he would also treat his boots and maybe other things, but who knows?
That's the only way they can survive is through blood, right?
Yep, they have to get a blood meal. Most of the times it's a chipmunk or a squirrel or something else, but once in a while it's us, and that's where the problems begin. What's that?
Not syrup.
No, they can't eat anything except for blood. They're obligated to do that, just like a vampire. All right, you've got your tick homework, right? When you get home, you can identify lower and higher risk areas around your home to think about, if I go into those areas, that's one place I'm going to choose one of my repellents. You can practice the visual or the tactile tick check, right? After you come in, just kind of, sometimes I just hit my phone and I say, give me a 90-minute timer, because I know I'm distracted, right? So it goes off at 90 minutes, and maybe within 2 hours, I'm actually getting into the shower and taking everything off. You can practice that. Build the tick six-pack if you can come up with these 3 repellents. I haven't found any place online that sells it all together. Maybe I should do that. That would be my $1 million idea. You can buy these 3, because I say everybody likes something a little different. Throw in your tick kit and your repellent guidelines with a little bit of sunscreen, maybe some permethrin, and you've got a great kit to protect kids, outdoors people, through the whole summer.
And drink the beer first.
And drink, oh right, the tick six-pack. I thought my friend Marsha would like this because I packed it into beer. I thought about going, this is so, not, most of them are really small and they fall out, but I found this one a while ago. Porch Rocker's a crappy beer, I've never had it, but. So I'm glad to use it. I was thinking about going to Sam Adams and saying, could you just give me 100 of those so I can start building kits? And then the last thing is, you know, buy some of this online. You can get 2 of these for $30 now online. You do a search, and this will cover 3 sets of clothing. So you've got 6 different treatments out of these 2 for $30, and it'll last you for 6 weeks. So you have to think about it a lot less. And it's depending on your behaviors, how deep you're getting into the duff and the material, it could be much more effective than these for you. But you have to, you know, this is about choices. I'm giving you lots of things that you could use. You get to decide what you like. And I think that's it. Just my smiling face, and then there's a couple of resources that I think you're going to post online, right?
So this is being recorded.
Yep.
So Hayden will be putting all the slides and putting it all together, and it will be on our page.
Good. So I hit it just right at 6:30. We answered lots of questions. I'm happy to stick around if you have any others. And if you want to come up, you can check out these things up close and personal. You can look at tick-treated socks and jackets, things of that sort. Just, you know, leave everything here so I can do it on my next talk.
Thank you so much, Matt.
You're welcome.